actually. So the webinar is using boom cards in a world language classroom with Ashley Mikkelsen. We'll be learning how to use boom cards in a world language classroom, and Ashley will be giving us examples in Spanish. We'll also be learning how to use boom cards for reading comprehension and how to print boom cards and why you might want to. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Ashley Mikkelsen.
Hi, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to get started here. I know it's kind of one of those things you just have to say it. So here we are using boom cards in the world language classroom. And just a quick introduction / a little bit of background about me. I'm a Spanish teacher. I'm currently out of the classroom to be home with my 2-year-old daughter who is taking a nap right now. Usually you'd find me in a high school classroom working with novices. So usually I teach levels 1 and 2, which in a high school setting can be anywhere from 9th to 12th grade students. So yeah, this is just a little bit about me and where I'm at right now. So this is kind of the two different aspects we're going to tackle this topic. So we're going to look at the different styles of boom cards you can create and just kind of like their different functionalities. And then we're also going to look at how that can be used to teach languages. So boom card tools, and then how we can use those tools in our classrooms. And that's kind of the two different approaches I'm going to be using today. So the first example is just multiple choice. And I know there are a lot of platforms that allow you to do multiple choice, but I wanted to make sure that I gave you examples from Boom. So this is from my cognate deck, and all they have to do is pick the option that isn't a cognate. So after, at the beginning of the year, I talked to my students about what a cognate is and how those are like helpful tools for my students. And we just go through a deck and we practice, what is and what isn't a cognate to just identify them. This is another example of multiple choice. They just have to decide, is it logical or illogical? So it's right, reading comprehension and decide, does that make sense based off of the vocabulary that we know and understand, or is that crazy? So another option you can do with Boom are multiple choice, but with pictures. And using pictures really opens up a whole other world for things with us in language. So I wanted to give you a couple examples. This is from a telling time deck, and I gave my students phones because, high school setting, this is kind of their lives. So they choose the phone that's showing the correct time. Another idea with pictures. So the nice thing about Boom, when you do multiple choice with pictures, is they can shuffle them. So that way not every student is seeing the same order of things. But in this example, they're going to listen to a short description. So this is clothing and kind of colors. And so the students are going to listen to a description of what a person is wearing. And then they're going to pick the picture that matches the description that they heard. So really listening comprehension, some vocabulary practice, things like that. Another option you can do with Boom is fill in the blank. And this can be kind of tricky for students because it's a computer grading it, right? You can set it up so that you grade it, but one of the things that I love most about Boom is that they're auto-graded. So you just kind of have to be careful with how you create your fill in the blank activities for your students, because if it's too long, there's too much like leeway, and the computer won't be able to tell like, well, they just skipped a period, it should have been fine, that sort of thing. So you either have to really prep your students and just say, it's a computer, it can't tell, you have to be right on, or you pick shorter fill in the blanks so that there's not as much room for mistakes. So like in this example, it was a preterite imperfect. So they're choosing the tense that makes the most sense, and they're just conjugating the one verb and they're putting it in the fill in the blank. So there's not a whole lot of flexibility in that response. And then another example is just filling in the missing direct object pronouns. So they have all of the other ones in the chart and they just have one little space to fill in, and then it's just right or wrong. Okay, this one is a little bit more complex. And so you can see down on the bottom there, it says, make sure to answer a complete sentence, because if the student didn't add a period at the end, they were getting it wrong, and that was really frustrating to them. But I wanted them to practice, like, you're writing a sentence needs punctuation. So what this card is it says respond to the question using the calendar. So this is practicing near future, right? I'm going to do something, or a person's going to do something. So they listen to the question. That big speaker is an audio, and it's saying like, what are you going to do on Thursday? And so they look at that calendar and they see all those actions, and they're going to write a sentence that says like, I'm going to, I think it's study on Thursday, right? But that's what all those, you see those little speakers underneath are for. If they can't tell what the picture is, they can hover over these little speakers and they can click and they can listen. Because for this one, I really wanted them to focus on that structure that we were working on. And I wasn't so stressed about them worrying about the vocabulary for all the infinitives. So that's just what I was focusing on there. So this is an example of a fill in the blank that's a little bit more complex and is a little bit trickier for them because they had to be writing that full sentence. Okay, so 4, we're gonna go on to digital manipulatives. And when I say digital manipulatives, I mean, like, you know, in your classroom, you've probably done something like this because, right, language teachers, we love to do things where you cut out the pieces and the students have to move them around or place them or reorder a sentence or draw on a map or color something based on, you know, what you read or understood. Boom allows you to do that without all of the prep work of cutting it all out. So this is some examples for how you can use kind of those hands-on, tactile, rearranging and physically manipulating things digitally, right? Without having to cut things out and prep them ahead of time. So in this example, it's a little bit more of a reading comprehension example. They read the paragraph and they're packing for a trip. So again, clothing. They have to read it and then they can pick the clothes and drag them into the suitcase. And then when they have everything packed that they need packed, according to the reading, they click submit. And because it's Boom and it's auto-correcting, if something is wrong, it's going to throw it out of the suitcase and they have to pack it again, which is really nice for that instant feedback. Another example, this is for like prepositions of location. And I don't know about you, but my textbook always put that in our city unit. So for this example, they're going to read information about where things are located in the city, and then they have to move the buildings based on that description. So these, like this museum, this cafe, and this theater, they can pick it up and put it somewhere on the street. And then they move the thing so that it is following the correct information. So this little description here says, the museum is to the right of the cafe. So they just place the buildings in the right spot. So I hope that makes sense, because I've done something like that where you like actually cut out a city and you have to put things on the map. This is just another way to do that without having to cut anything out. And this is an example of scrambled sentences. So they got a translation up on top. It says he's going to read some books. And they have all the little pieces of the Spanish sentence that they're going to form down below. And they just have to drag the words and place them in the correct boxes. Okay. So one of my favorite things about Boom is that you can add audio because, well, especially when we went to distance learning and we weren't in person anymore, I felt like my students weren't hearing enough of the language. And that really makes a big difference for them, because if it's a new word and they're just getting introduced to a word and they're just reading it, they might not be pronouncing it correctly in their heads. So I really like that you can add an audio so that way the first time they're encountering a word, or even if it's the second or the third time or the 17th time, they can start to connect, oh, that sound looks like this on paper. And especially like Spanish, obviously that's important. Obviously in other world languages is important. I really think about my French teacher friends when I think about adding audio, because, well, I'm not a French speaker, but so many times I look at a French word, I'm like, that's not what I thought that was going to sound like. So that's what this add audio tool is really helpful for. So let's look at some examples for this. This is a really simple one. It's for subject pronouns. So what they are going to do is they're going to listen to a subject pronoun, right? Like he or she, and whatever subject pronoun they hear, they're going to drag that little speaker and they're going to pop it on top of the picture that matches what it's illustrating. So you can see in the top left, the kid who's pointing to himself, that's I. So if they heard I, they would drop it right on top. Another option, this is from my days and months. They listen and they put them in sequential order. So in the speakers, they have 3 different months of the year, and they listen and they have to think, okay, does March come before or after August? So then they're going to put it, 1, 2, 3 in order. Okay, so now that we've looked at some of the functionality of Boom and like the different techniques you can use to create decks, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the styles of decks to create and use. So now that you know, like, okay, these are all the different kind of tools. Well, not all. These are a lot of the different kind of tools that Boom allows you to do. How can I apply that into the assignments and the tools that I'm going to want to use with my students? So the first kind of style of deck that I like to think of when I'm creating decks are grammar and vocabulary decks. Okay, and basically all of our previous examples, so every time I showed you like, Boom can do this, Boom can do this, almost all of those examples were from what a deck that I would say is a grammar or vocabulary deck, where the purpose of the deck was to focus on, conjugating a verb or practicing a set of vocabulary for a chapter, or maybe doing both for a review for a test. So you've already seen quite a few examples for that, but I just wanted to make sure that like, okay, that's one big style of deck you can use with your students. Another type of deck are what I call story decks. And basically what you can do is you can use Boom to create these digital stories for your students. So you already saw how you can add pictures and how you can add text and how you can add audio. So you can kind of combine all of those pieces and create these stories that read aloud to your students that practice, whatever it is you need to practice. So this example here is from a story that I wrote for my students. It's called Un Día Terrible. So it's a terrible day. And in this story, it focuses on like school and subjects and classes and like stuff that they need for their classes. And Adam, our main character, is having a terrible day. And so over and over again, he's going to these classes and he just runs into these problems. So this story, as you can see, this is just kind of a page from the story. As they turn to the first page in the story, it's going to read it to them. So you can see the speaker up in the top left, and they can just listen and follow along. And so I always have a version of my stories where that's all that it is. They're just reading and listening to the story. Okay. But I also like to do versions where they have questions. So maybe the first time I introduce the story to them, we're just reading the story. But later on, we do another version where they can read and then they get asked a couple questions as they go, just to check for understanding. So in this example, right, they read about he's going to gym class, and now it says, okay, what time does he have gym class? So if they need to, they can click on this arrow on the top and they can go back and reread, right? Because I really want to focus on them looking for comprehension, right? Can they find that information from the text? And then if they need to come back to the question, okay, now they can come and click. So that's just an example of how you can use a story deck with your students. Just have them do the story, or you can add kind of comprehension questions along the way. Sometimes, this is not from the terrible day at school story. This is a totally different story. This story is about a fish who wants to go to the beach. So this activity comes at the very end of the story. So the students get all the way through the digital story, they've read the story, they've done some comprehension activities along the way, and now they're at the very end of the story, and I wanted to do a little bit more reinforcement with the structures they were getting from the story. So if you're familiar with Spanish, there are tener expressions in there, which my textbook always kind of chunked them all together. So we put a bunch of them into this story to make it work. So the sentence on top, they need to read it, and then they need to click the picture that matches the meaning. So it says, Perry tiene ganas de ir a la playa. He wants to go to the beach, or he feels like going to the beach. And up here on the top left, they can click that reading or that book and go back to the reading and say like, well, does he? That's weird. Why would a fish want to go to the beach? And when they're sure, like, okay, yep, I understand what that sentence is saying, they could click, oh, this image is of a beach. There we go. Okay. So the last way that I like to use decks in Boom decks in my classroom or with my students are what I call like culture decks. So this isn't a deck that focuses on grammar or vocabulary, although that might be embedded in it some way. And it's not a made up story. This is something that focuses on, right, history and culture of the languages that we're studying. So I just wanted to give you an example of something that this actually does combine grammar and vocabulary with it, because I've taught in a lot of settings where I had to follow a very strict curriculum and pacing guide. And so sometimes it was kind of hard to fit in those celebrations that you really wanted to do. So this is a deck where the students get to like kind of explore Dia de los Muertos, but they're also reviewing things that are really common, like Spanish 1, beginning of the year kind of skills. So the way this deck is set up, there's a couple pictures to kind of explain it to you, is it's kind of like this, oh no, there's this problem. We want to celebrate Dia de los Muertos, but we don't have everything we need. So they get this blank ofrenda, and they have to click on the different pieces of the ofrenda to find the things that are missing. And as they click on them, they get a little bit of information about that element and how it's important to the celebrations. And it's just right, a little kind of bloop, kind of tidbit, but it also then ties into a skill. So here they're reading about Las Flores and what that has to do with the celebration. And then their activity that goes with it is they're practicing their numbers. So they're gonna move the flowers into the basket based on the number that they read. And then there's, enough tasks that are all tied into the different items on the ofrenda. Another example is kind of like the story decks that I showed you, only instead of it being a made up story, it's information about the celebration. So this deck is about La Tomatina, and it reads to them, right? And it's just really little pieces of information. And then as they're going, well, actually this is a different one, but it kind of shows you. After I've given them some sort of reading, I usually follow it up with some sort of comprehension activity. So this example is La Tomatina. This example, as you can probably tell from the image, is not La Tomatina. This example is from a deck on El Cinco de Mayo. So they're, after reading about a celebration, now they're gonna write, do I understand? What information did they get from that reading? So that way I can tell, did they really understand it, or do we need to go back and kind of reteach some of that information? Hey, I hope those examples were helpful for you. I just wanted to let you know that you can come hang out with me on Instagram. My handle is at Srta_Spanish. And now I think we're gonna get into some Q&A time. So I'm excited to hear what you have for me.
Yes, thank you very much, Ashley. We have a question, and it says, what textbook does Ashley use?
So I'm not in the classroom right now, right home with my daughter, but in the past I've used En Español 1 and En Español 2. And then Descubre was another one that I used. So those are kind of my 3 that I've used the most.
Okay. So we have a question in the chat box. Is there a way to record directly in Boom Cards? I've been recording in another app, how to upload it to Boom Cards.
I also record another app and then upload. I used to, before I switched phones, I used to have an app called literally called Recorder app, and I would just record 26 different little audios and then upload them all at once. Now that I have a different phone, for some reason I can't find that app anymore, but now I just use my computer and I just record usually between 20 and 30 little audio clips and then upload them all to Boom.
Perfect. And we have another question, and it says, what are good activities for kids who can't read?
So that one's kind of out of my range of expertise. I work with high school students, so most of them come to me with some language skills, but I would really take advantage of that audio recording tool and the images tool, right? So you can use a lot of images and have them drag and drop and pair things, what you could put sequencing. So if you say you were doing a daily routine and they have to put get out of bed, brush teeth, eat breakfast, right? And drag those things into order. You can do all of that with images without putting any text on there at all. So that might be a good option.
Yeah, and you can also, if you're adding audio, you can go ahead and click on the audio and then click change background, and you can change that audio background to an actual image. So a student can click on the image and they will hear the audio. So yeah, that's another tip. So I had a question, and it is, how do teachers can pair Boom Cards with other activities in the classroom?
One of my favorite ways to do that is to put them in stations. So not sure how familiar, some people call them centers, usually when I do them, I do 4 different stations. So I like to focus on like the 4 skills. So reading, writing, speaking, and listening. And then I usually, depending on the number of students I have, I double loop them. So I'll have 4 stations set up on this side of the room and 4 stations set up on this side of the room. And my students will go to each station and rotate through them. And the reason why I double loop them is because usually I have so many students that having just 4 stations would mean my groups would be really big. So if I split them in half and then put them into stations, it's a lot more manageable just for the number of kids at each group. And just having a boom card station. So when they get to that location in the classroom, a little piece of paper that says, go to Bloom, then do this deck. And then they're gonna work on that deck for that amount of time. Also, they work really well as like a warm-up activity. So just as you're coming into class, maybe you're taking attendance or taking care of somebody who was absent or, you know, like those sorts of things that you have to do. Having a direction slide up on your screen. So as students are coming in, they say, oh, I'm gonna go work on that. Or at the end of class, right? Say maybe they were doing like, you know, kind of a scavenger hunt activity or something where they were all going to finish at a different pace. Having a boom card set be your kind of your fast finisher is a really good option, because then students can go to that and work individually and not need a ton of support from you. And because they're going to be all finishing at a different time, it's a good kind of catch all.
Yeah, and now that you mentioned like scavenger activities and all that, like which one is your favorite activity to do in Boom? I know we have like hidden images, we have scavenger hunt, escape rooms, like reading comprehension one, like the stories.
I think my favorite is to use, you know, I talked about the digital manipulatives. I really like that I don't have to cut stuff out.
Yeah.
Like, if you can combine like audio and then the digital manipulatives, like those kinds of cards are my favorite, because I really feel like they help students get that listening piece and then practice where it physically goes and like do some sort of ordering or sequencing skills. I really like those.
Yeah, and students love technology, so that's another plus. We have another question in the Q&A, and it's, where do you get all of your fun images for your cards?
Oh, I buy them, all of them. I
Can
am
you
not an
mention?
artist. Yeah, I am not an artist. I can't draw any of, like, none of the pictures. So I usually go to TPT, or Boom also has like an image store. So while you're creating them, you can like find something in there and pull them right in. Depending on the deck, like some of my cultural decks, I'll go to like a blog post or something like that and see if I can't find some like actual photos. And those would be something that I would use just in my classroom, right? But you know, yeah, I buy them or find them. I can't make any art. Yeah.
Can you like mention some of your like your favorite authors like for images?
Um, Artifacts is somebody I use quite a bit. She's from Spain and she makes some beautiful images that are really clear. And she also does sets that are really, really thorough for like vocabulary sets. They've been really helpful. Dovey Funk makes some really fun sets that are like, they're like step by step completing the art. So as a student answers a question, they get a little piece of the puzzle filled in, and then like you can keep going. I really like those kinds of sets. I can't remember her store name. Viva Bilingual. Yeah, Viva Bilinguals has some
Oh,
art that's really cute. And Rainbow Sprinkle Studio, I think, is the
yeah,
other.
I love Rainbow Sprinkle Studio.
Those are
Yeah.
some of my favorites that are just like bright and cute. And like the thing that is so fun about boom cards is that because you're not printing them always, because they're seeing them digitally, it doesn't matter how much color you use. Like sometimes when I design something that I know I'm going to print, I have to be like, use the black and white, you know, which is sad because some of that art is so much like, it's so much more fun in those bright colors. So
Mhm.
yeah, I really let my like clip art fiend in me shine when I'm shopping for boom card things.
Yeah. Also, I was going to mention that right now we're selling like authors are selling images in the Boom store. So if you're like creating a deck, you can go ahead and click on the, I think it is like buy images when you're looking in your images library, and you can go ahead and actually look for an image like boy jumping, and it if we have it, it will appear there.
That's
Yeah,
really
so you
handy.
can purchase, images from other like Boom authors.
Oh, good. And I see that Kyle found their links and is putting them in the chat. So that's good because, man, I was like, I can't think of anybody's store name. So thanks, Kyle.
Yeah, another thing we had on the like goals that you were going to show us how to print Boom cards and why do we may want to print Boom cards.
So there is a help FAQ page on Boom that walks you through all the steps. So I won't show you the actual like how to, but one of my favorite things to do with them. Okay, so option one is to kind of like old school your task cards. So I know like before I knew Boom cards existed, one of my favorite activities would be to do task cards, which is basically where you take a worksheet and you cut it up and then you hang it around your classroom and your students have to walk around and answer the cards. You can do that with your Boom cards. Of course, there are always going to be a few cards that doesn't really work for, like I talked about how you can add audio. Obviously the audio doesn't print.
Or the drag and drop.
Right, yeah, so there are things like that, or you can print them and like they're gonna have to write on them or like some of that sort of stuff, but it's nice for if you wanted to do a change of pace, like maybe you're feeling a little screened out in your classroom, you can just print them and hang them around your room. Another good reason, or maybe not necessarily good reason, but handy. I don't know if anybody else has experienced this. I hope I'm not alone in this. Every now and then you get a student who like, you get an email and since like student B doesn't have a computer for the rest of the year and you're like, great. I don't know about you, but I can use computers. So it's nice to be able to just like print your cards and be like, here, student B, they're gonna do them on their computer, but you get to do them on your laptop or on your paper and pencil on your desktop, like on your actual desktop. There we go. Third option, that's a really just handy way to do them is, I was talking about those story decks, is I like to just print the story decks and cut them apart and then staple them. Or, if your library is fancy, sometimes media specialists have like a binder machine. Those are really cool. Maybe I'm the only one who geeks out over being able to make my own books with the binders, but whatever. So you print them, you cut them apart, you either staple them or make friends with your librarian, and then you can add them to your classroom library. So when your students are doing like free voluntary reading time, or maybe you just have 5 minutes at the end of the class and you're not sure how to fill it, you can pull out those little books. And if the students already did the Boom decks digitally, it's nice for them to kind of return to them because they're already like familiar with the story, so they're going to be successful with it. Or maybe you really liked a story, but you just like didn't have time to get to it. As a whole class, you can pull that out and put it in your classroom library. So that way it's just an option for your students. And that's really handy too. And then you can use those stories for your, I use them for emergency subplans all the time. So if I don't know about you, but I have been in schools where they like require you to have, 5 emergency subplans done in August. And you're like,
exactly.
So if you just print off some of your stories, and then I have a packet of reading activities that you can do with like any reading, right? So I just like they're like, well, you need 5 subplans. So I'm like, okay, so I need 125 copies of this 3-page thing times 5. Okay, here you go. So that's the other reason why I would print some of my Boom stories ahead of time, is just to have them handy for subplans. So yeah,
that's super cool. And we have like many other like Boom cards that you can actually have like as manipulatives, like actually like cropping them and then having that drag and drop feature, but like with actual like like Velcro or something like that. If you like that. So yeah, there's another thing. I have a question here. Do you use reports to see students' performance and progress?
Yes. I'm not very good at it, I got to admit, because so timeline wise, I met Boom and started using it. And then, and that was for like the last quarter of the school year. And then after that is when I left to be home with my daughter. So I didn't have as much time to become as proficient in reading the reports, because if you haven't checked out the report screen, you might not know, like, there's a lot of information. They give you a lot. But the thing that I found the most helpful is, you know, when I was talking about how the fill in the blanks can get kind of long, and sometimes students get frustrated by like, you know, I didn't add a period, or I switched these two words and word order matters and that sort of stuff. The reports, you can go into them and see exactly what the students were typing. So sometimes I would get a message from a student that says, this card is broken. Okay. So then, you know, I'd go in and look, and like it looked like this student like sneezed on the keyboard and out came like,
Exactly.
not, you know, like that's not a word in any language. So
Yeah, exactly.
like that kind of thing was really handy to just be able to kind of like cover my bases, and to be able to show parents like, hey, your student didn't actually try this deck, or they did try this deck and they tried it 3 times and look at how much better they got as they were practicing. Do you think they're going to be ready to retake this assessment? And to be able to have that conversation with them and have the reports to kind of back up the conversation as we were going.
Yeah, they have exactly. They have a lot of information like fluency, like time, the average, and for all of the responses, you can see from the reports that like what like the actual answer, like what the student did. So yeah, that is really like helpful. So let me see. Yeah, so I think those were all of the questions. So, well, thank you very much, Ashley, for answering all of those questions and giving us this amazing presentation. So right now, I'll be like showing you all how you can request help if you need any more help in the future. We're here to help. I'll be sharing my screen really quick to just show you how you can request help. So if you're from anywhere in the website, you'll be able to see this help button right here. So if you click there, you can type whatever you want to, like your questions, for example, webinars. And you know, it will show you a lot of FAQs, the one that you were mentioning before. So if you click on those, it will take you like to the FAQ or article with all the information you need. If that's not enough for you, you can also go here to settings and then help center. And here you can also find the like FAQs and more information, but you can create a ticket, like a help ticket. It will send us an email and we can help you via email, or you can also contact us. If you go right here, you see our phone number. So we also have a phone numbers for you to call us and we can help you via phone. So this is how you can get even more help from Boom. Also, we wanted to mention that we will be having other webinars in this October. So the first one was the Language Classroom webinar, and we also have 2 more webinars. We also have the Creating Boom card. So if you're interested in that, make sure to go here and register for those. Right now we'll be sending let me go here. Right now we'll be sending a link to a survey link, feedback survey, I'm sorry. This is super important for us. If you can fill that up, we love to learn from you. We read those. So if you can go ahead and fill that up, that will be super helpful for us. As a reminder, this webinar was recorded, so you will be finding the recording in a follow-up email and also on our YouTube channel and the Facebook page. And yeah, so let's review what we learned today. This webinar was using boom cards in a world language classroom. Some examples were given in Spanish, about how to use boom cards for reading comprehension and how to print boom cards and what you might want to. So I hope we can answer all of your questions. Thank you again, Ashley. Ashley's information is in the chat, so if you want to contact her, you can do so. You can find her on Instagram and the blog, Srta Spanish. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Make sure to stay tuned for the other webinars. Bye-bye.